Godtear has a new champion, a new warband, and this is part 2 where we are exploring the Tactica of the Treekin. So I pushed up to my channel here under the Godtear playlist, part 1, where we were looking at Durthax, Branch Lord, and Treekin. And looking at that first impression, asking those questions, how are we going to use this really dynamic and really amazing champion? So now in part 2, looking at the followers, and then at part 3, we're going to follow up in a little while with a tabletop feedback. How does it work with the missions? How does it work some different synergies with the different warbands? What opportunities for combos exist there? But the idea here is that initial unboxing, looking at the amazing miniatures, and then looking at the cards and saying, what do we see? First glance, what is that Tactica that we can begin to explore? I always like to start with the stats, because this is going to tell me initially at this entry point, these followers, what is their role on the tabletop with those powers? Can I be a little bit more aggressive because they're more combat oriented? Do I need to be a little bit more conservative because their powers are a little bit more nuanced? They don't have the full survivability that baseline as champions? Or are they used for other things? There's a few warbands that have followers that, yes, they can attack, they can defend, but they're more about movement or area denial or interacting in a strange, unique way with that champion. So the stats are the entry point. We've got 2 move. That's solid. We've got 4 evade. That was interesting. I was surprised by that, because the narrative of this ancient forest and the tears from the sky, the god tears falling down and infusing this sacred area, bringing the Treekin to life, bringing this champion to life. I mean, I guess if you're animated by god tears, you're jacked up. I thought they'd be much slower. With the evade, that's solid. 1 armor, 1 life. That's solid for what they are. So the stat line, evade's a little bit higher. I think you've got that initial opportunity where you might be able to evade the attacks. 1 armor, 1 life, you're going to get hit. You're pretty much going to go down. So that entry point, I see this as they could attack, they could defend. It's solid. Okay, let's look at the 2 abilities that really, for me, how I see us using these in conjunction with the champion. And I just want to framework for a moment. Ultimately, what I saw in part 1 was a very dynamic champion that I would do my best to area control, area denial, plant in a certain area, leverage those amazing moons and that regen ability. So my opponent has to do 2 things, possibly make 2 choices. And the Treekin, the followers, are going to support those 2 choices to make it as hard as possible. Either try to destroy the warband, try to take out the trees, so this way we can push that area denial back and utilize that, or invest and say it's too many resources. I'm going to be burning too many game turns and abilities to do that. Maybe I'll just try to area control or just ignore it and see what happens. Well, the challenge there, of course, is then I'll be able to do what I'm trying to do on there. So I see the Treekin as supporting this idea of area control and essentially nullifying other champions, other warbands, especially possibly Slayers. And again, this is just first impression. We'll see what we can pull off on the tabletop itself. Taking root, hit effect. Hit effect. You may remove 1 wound from Durthax. So I'm going to be like regenerating with those healing potions off of 14 health. And just so now what we have is I have the champion able to regen, and I've got the followers able to regen. And it says hit effect. That's interesting, that wording, because we have dice pools in Godtear. I'm going to try and do something. I'm going to try and damage you. I take my first dice pool after I'm in range. This is the volume of attacks. Obviously, some warbands, some champions, some followers are going to have a higher dice pool than others, but that dice pool is that initial dice pool. I raise it high to the gods. God tiers, roll it out, and now that initial dice pool that started, it's going to be less because those are the number of actual hits. Then we're going to apply it, we're going to transfer it, we're going to remove armor, and then hopefully, ideally, I rolled legendary, and we're going to transfer a lot of those hits to life. The hit effect means I bypass a lot of that. I just need to hit you. So yes, this is an attack with taking root, but I just need to hit. Obviously, I'm going to try and go against lower agility targets with that, but I get to remove a wound. So I'm planting, I'm there, and I'm regenerating wounds. Slayers are going to have a hard time killing my champion and getting those bonus points. Kind of an anti-Slayer antidote, balancing that aspect out. Branch Ward, enemy champions and followers. Enemy champions and followers cannot be placed or recruited in hexes adjacent to Treekin. I had to read that again and visualize this. I'm visualizing the miniatures and the piles of tiers and thinking about this. Branch Ward, enemy champions, whether that's 1, 2, or 3, and followers can't be placed or recruited in hexes adjacent to Treekin. So that power is very interesting in that I interpret that as if you're already there next to me, then obviously if I pop that off, you're occupying that hex next to me. You haven't moved. But I see this as like a tree wall or just a branch wall where as I'm moving up or I'm looking for an area control, area denial, and we push this off, enemy champions and followers cannot be placed or recruited in hexes adjacent to Treekin. Placed is important. It doesn't say move. It says placed. So champions that have some sort of ability or followers that have some sort of ability, pick up and place and this and that. That wording placed means you're not moving next to me no matter what. Followers, okay. Champions. So if I can get up there quickly, turn one, dominate some tiers, dominate an area, start radiating this out. As I have that, now of course the Treekin themselves, I need to have a radius and I need to position them. They can't be everywhere. But I see this as almost a refused flank type deployment where if I have Durthax in that one area and I've got the Treekin, say, on the left hex side and left hex top, then that area control pushes that out. If I've got a tier on another side and I'm kind of like a shield, right, this invisible shield, you want to get to that tier, you want to get to that target, you're going to have to burn double movement to get over there. So that's really interesting. And champions too. Champions also, if I'm playing with 3 champions and I've got a wounded champion and I'm trying to run them away, especially from a Slayer, if I'm trying to run them away because I want to deny those points, right? You get regular points, a lot of points for killing a champion, bonus points depending on faction color. If I can run them away, sometimes you'll try to chase them down because you're like, look, they've got 1 life, I've got alpha, I'm going to pop something off and just damage it. Well, if I can throw up that ward, that's going to push you a little bit further away. You'll have to beat on somebody else. You're going to beat on a 14 wound champion. All right, maybe I switch and pick up some points killing followers, but that's still denying a lot of points. And that sidebars into an interesting thing where I see this warband, the duality of it. Every Godtear mission, I'm trying to do my best to do 2 things. First, to suck up as many points as I possibly can. But at the same time, through hopefully good Tactica that we've been exploring, deny my opponent the ability to earn points. So I'm out there earning, and I'm trying to prevent you from earning. Area denial and kind of manipulation of moving champions and followers so that it takes them out of their attacks and stuff, that makes it harder for your opponent, for those warbands, to earn those points. We've got a great champion in warband that can do that. And that synergy is only going to grow. That synergy is only going to grow if you're playing 2 warbands or 3 warbands or some sort of custom game where it's a battle total and throwing in multiple warbands. So I see the Treekin as supporting, as really, really supporting the primary champion and moving. Now, the vulnerability here, of course, vulnerability. Two really good powers that I want to use, and I'm going to have to be in the mix of things because the taking root, just forget about damage for a second, even though you're dealing damage. It's a hit effect. I got to be in range to hit something, and usually if I'm in range, you're in range. So I am making myself a little bit vulnerable. Branch Ward, we've got to be in that positioning in that area to push them away, to utilize that. What's interesting there, and it's actually bigger than we think, because let's think of chaining out. If I've got a champion, if I've got a Treekin, the gears are turning. If we've got a Treekin on a hex, the hex to the left is going to be recruited in adjacent hex. That's going to be adjacent, that hex to the left. That means if I put a Treekin, hex to the left is adjacent, then another Treekin, if I chain them out, that area of control is actually pretty big. That radius can get pretty big pretty fast on there. But back to the idea, the vulnerability that I see with this, and we might have to jack up their armor, we might have to have some synergy, is they're going to be very active pushing forward in the mix of things. Sometimes what will happen is mid-game, end-game, I might want to run away with some followers to start starving and denying those points. There's times when I want to be there and times where I run away. I might still run away if that's the best move, but then I'm not utilizing these these followers, the Treekin, as intended on there. So I think there is a little bit of vulnerability where if you're going up against warbands that are geared up to kill followers, they might be a little bit more vulnerable and earn those points. But again, wow, area control. Okay, part 2. We're going to move to part 3. I've got some games lined up in about 4 or 5 hours. We're going to start rolling some dice. We're going to start getting some Godtear. We're going to start throwing down with some different champions and look at new opportunities, look at new synergies, look at the different missions, and see how that plays out with this new champion and warband.